Okay, we'll start with this. Well, De La Hoya on his own frustrations. They're not living up to their contract. He was quoted as saying, "In my mind, Canelo is willing to fight anyone. Obviously, the way he's proved it many times in his career. He's willing to fight Billy Joe Saunders. He's willing to fight Callum Smith. My frustration is DAZN." De La Hoya told BoxingScene.com in an interview on Tuesday night, just a couple of hours before he learned of the lawsuit. "My frustration is the obligation that DAZN has to its fans and to Canelo. Another frustration is DAZN's obligation to live up to a contract that they signed. That's a huge frustration. That's a huge deal breaker for us. That's where the frustration is. How can you fight a top-level opponent like Callum Smith, an elite opponent like Callum Smith and Billy Joe Saunders, and then have DAZN not live by their contract? It doesn't make sense to me, and that's where the frustration is. We're obviously hoping we get back to normal very soon, and we can hopefully have gate revenue as soon as possible. But we figured it out," De La Hoya said, of being able to do an Alvarez fight without a crowd. "The only worry I have is DAZN living up to its contract. If anyone tells me Callum Smith or Billy Joe Saunders are not premium fighters, I must be crazy," De La Hoya said. "I must not know boxing. I must not have been boxing for 35 years. Let's get this going. Live up to your contract. Let's see 3 great fights. Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, Triple G. Whatever order. Let's get it going. Let's do it. We're waiting for you, DAZN." De La Hoya insisted the fight with Golovkin would have happened this month had it not been for the coronavirus pandemic. Alvarez was supposed to fight Saunders in May, and Golovkin was due to fight a mandatory challenger, Kamil Zeremata, in the spring. And then they would have met for a third time in a fight that had been agreed to. That fight was going to happen, De La Hoya said. Canelo is willing to fight the very best, and he does that because he respects the fans. He does that because he wants to be great. It's frustration because we have 80-plus fighters. We have several world champions who are not fighting, De La Hoya said. But the truth of the matter is, people want to see Canelo fight. That's the bottom line. They want to see the biggest star in boxing fight on DAZN, and people are getting fed up. I want to deliver the best fights possible. DAZN declined to comment. If I have a contract and I don't live up to it, what's going to happen? And yes, we don't want to litigate. That's the last resort. That's not even a resort for us, De La Hoya said. We've been great partners. Yes, they've been great partners. We just want to get a fight going. The fans deserve it. Now, what you guys need to bear in mind as you hear these direct quotes from Oscar De La Hoya is that they were made before he caught wind of the lawsuit. The lawsuit that seems to point the finger more at Golden Boy than it does DAZN. I mean, DAZN's definitely in there. They are one of the affected parties, but rest assured, when you read through those 24 pages of that lawsuit, the impression that you get is that Canelo Alvarez is blaming Golden Boy Promotions for backdooring it. The article states, Alvarez came to understand that DAZN believed that De La Hoya and or other representatives of Golden Boy Promotions had promised, either contractually or otherwise, that Alvarez would select Gennady Golovkin as one of his 2019 opponents. Prior to these discussions with defendants, Alvarez was unaware that DAZN believed Golden Boy Promotions had promised that he would fight Golovkin, unaware that the DAZN contract gave DAZN the right to reject the opponents he selected, and was unaware that the DAZN contract contained clauses potentially inconsistent with those of the Alvarez contract.
So what, are there 2 contracts?
It sure sounds like, and it sounds a lot like Canelo Alvarez was completely oblivious to the existence of this second contract that was negotiated on his behalf by Golden Boy Promotions without his knowledge. It seems that Canelo Alvarez had no idea how much say-so DAZN had in the matter, though that say-so was granted to them, or at least agreed upon, by Golden Boy Promotions. I think that the misconception here is that Canelo Alvarez was dealing directly with DAZN. No, Canelo Alvarez was dealing with Golden Boy Promotions, who was dealing directly with DAZN.
Didn't negotiate this contract on his own behalf.
His promoter did it for him, as his promoter is so empowered to do so. I think that if we're hearing about 2 separate contracts, essentially what they're talking about is the existing contract between Canelo Alvarez and Golden Boy Promotions, the contract that establishes that promotional outfit as his promoter that negotiates on his behalf and orchestrates situations for him. I think that's one contract, and I think Golden Boy's contract with DAZN is the other.
The deal they struck.
To stage fights on their platform, not limited to Canelo Alvarez's fights. And whatever that contract empowered DAZN to do, whatever entitlements for for DAZN associated with that contract might have been entitlements that Canelo Alvarez wasn't aware of. When you read through this lawsuit, and it sounds a lot like Canelo Alvarez was in the dark as far as what was agreed upon when this deal was struck. He seems blindsided. He seems blindsided by what entitlements DAZN has and whatever it is that Golden Boy agreed to
get this deal done.
You gotta remember what was going on at that time. At that time, Golden Boy Promotions was very much a refugee camp full of fighters looking for a home, looking for a platform. At that time, DAZN had just hit the American market, just hit the scene, throwing a lot of cash around. And the refugees over there at Golden Boy, looking for a home after HBO bowed out of boxing,
They decided to strike a deal with DAZN.
I've no doubts that Canelo Alvarez, the hottest ticket in town, the hot commodity, was a big part of that deal. Perhaps that's why the news of the deal being struck was reported as such, as if to say that this is a deal that Canelo Alvarez struck between himself and DAZN, when in reality the deal was struck on his behalf
By his promoter.
But he himself, he the fighter, doesn't have full disclosure of what it is his promoter agreed to. And that's why he feels blindsided. Essentially, Canelo Alvarez's gripe isn't so much with DAZN, it's with Golden Boy Promotions. And if you read through that 24-page lawsuit, that's what you'll find. So I wonder what stance Oscar De La Hoya is going to take now that Canelo Alvarez seems to be shifting the blame on him and his promotional company. Is he going to keep the same energy that he exhibited hours before news broke that Canelo was suing not only Golden Boy Promotions, but DAZN? Because when you read these quotes, which are from hours before the news broke, hours before Oscar had learned that Canelo was suing Golden Boy Promotions, if you read through these quotes, Oscar sounds a lot like he's on Canelo Alvarez's side, but is he still on his side now that Canelo is blaming Golden Boy for what's going on? Golden Boy Promotions, who DAZN are only committing to for 2 shows for what remains of 2020. The Haymon fight in October against Turiano Johnson, and the Ryan Garcia versus Luke Campbell fight in either November or December. A fight that reportedly is still experiencing money issues. I mean, you wonder if Matchroom were at the helm of this thing, as opposed to Golden Boy, if the fight itself and all its particulars wouldn't have been ironed out by now. You also gotta wonder why it is that DAZN is only committing to 2 Golden Boy shows for what remains of 2020. Is this a byproduct of the litigation that is underway? Is this just due to COVID or court cases? It's anybody's guess at this point. Things have been very topsy-turvy over there at Golden Boy, and it's just getting worse. You're talking about 80-plus fighters that are so affected by this situation between Golden Boy Promotions and DAZN, who's only committing to 2 more Golden Boy shows for what remains of 2020. Well, the name being thrown around the most is obviously Canelo's, but Canelo is not the only one who is affected by this situation. Many fighters like Sulem Urbinas, Anicia Estrada, Marlon Esparza, WBO champion Patrick Teixeira, welterweight contenders Vigil Ortiz, and Blair Cobbs.
They're all affected by this.
Or they could be. Only staging 2 more Golden Boy cards for what remains of 2020 deprives a lot of fighters of a lot of opportunities. One is left to wonder if this isn't DAZN's way of castigating the people over there at Golden Boy for not ironing out the wrinkles with their star fighter, Canelo Alvarez, which basically led to this mess, led to this clusterfuck.
Are they punishing them?
Is this DAZN's way? Letting the people over there at Golden Boy know that they're experiencing buyer's remorse, and if they can't smooth things over between them, Canelo Alvarez, and the platform itself, then
There'll be consequences.
they're only committing to a very limited number of shows, and going into 2021, that commitment would be a very wavering commitment, as the biggest selling point Golden Boy Promotions had was Canelo Alvarez. That's a big reason that the people at DAZN went into business with them. But if you can't guarantee us that you're going to get that guy in the ring to boost up subscriptions
For us.
drum up business, then we don't need you.
One way to interpret this.
We've already heard that DAZN has laid off a portion of its staff here stateside, another portion of it over there in Brazil, but more particular to this conversation. DAZN still has every intention of going global, but it seems that their interest in appealing to the American market is a wavering interest, as their biggest selling point for the people in this part of the world, the face of boxing, as it were, in the United States, Canelo Alvarez, He's not delivering. He's not fighting. He's suing.
Or trying to.
And while much of this 24-page lawsuit seems to point the finger at Golden Boy Promotions more so than it does DAZN, the same applies. DAZN is affected as a result. They were going to use this guy to tap into the American market. He was supposed to be their selling point, was supposed to be a big part of their bottom line in the United States, and it's not working out. I'll tell you the truth. Not so much for Canelo Alvarez, Oscar De La Hoya, or DAZN, but for all those other fighters who are so affected by this ongoing situation between Golden Boy Promotions, Canelo, and DAZN. I hope that an amicable solution can be reached, something that caters to the aforementioned parties in such a way that the show can go on. Because for a lot of fighters, they're affected by this whether they're directly involved or not.
And for the sport itself.
What does it say about the sport, and what does it do to the sport when the face of boxing in this part of the world isn't even fucking boxing?
It's not good.
There was a big hubbub yesterday over what some people think might be Canelo Alvarez's next fight. Per a tweet from Michael Benson, purse bids for Canelo Alvarez versus Avni Yildirim for the vacant WBC super middleweight title are set for September 21st. Yildirim's promoter, Ahmet Oner, has reiterated that they're linked up with Al Haymon's PBC, who are preparing a sizable bid. And myself, I don't think that this fight is going to gain any traction. I didn't think it was going to gain any traction before Canelo Alvarez filed suit, and I certainly don't think it's going to gain traction afterwards. Canelo's all tied up in a legal clusterfuck between Golden Boy Promotions and DAZN. And I can't recall a time when I saw a fighter experiencing promotional issues, and it didn't stifle that fighter's career. Whether it's Andre Ward or Mikey Garcia, who spent a lengthy amount of time away from the ring, trying to get away from Top Rank, trying to get out of that contract.
Usually that's how it goes.
And comparatively, Canelo Alvarez is a bigger name, bigger star, and this is a bigger clusterfuck than anything we saw involving Andre Ward or Mikey Garcia. Yet those guys' careers were held up as a result of the promotional issues they were experiencing. So why wouldn't Canelo Alvarez's career be held up? There are those out there who think that this fight might actually come off due to the involvement of Al Haymon. But that is per Avni Yildirim's promoter.
That's what he's saying.
Who knows how involved Al Haymon is or isn't until it's time to put up or shut up, until it's time to pay the piper on September 21st. I find it hard to conjure, hard to reconcile that in the midst of this global pandemic, anybody would put up sizable amounts of money just to land a Canelo Alvarez versus Avni Yildirim fight. I mean, what's that going to cost you? $35 million? $30 million? $25 million? $20 million? $15 million? I mean, even for $15 million, even if Canelo Alvarez were willing to take that kind of a pay cut, is it actually worth it just to land that fight? What do you think that fight's going to do? You think that fight's going to move the needle? Alvarez versus Yildirim? How much of your own money or someone else's are you willing to stake just to land Canelo versus Yildirim? And that's assuming Canelo has any plans, any desire to fight this year, to have a fight before the year is out. He does seem very much preoccupied right about now, doesn't he? I mean, before he worries about fighting a guy like Avni Yildirim, he's got this fight with Golden Boy Promotions and DAZN to think about.
Does anybody really think this fight will come off?
Even if I entertain some wild scenarios where, I don't know, Canelo decides to go through with this as a means to spite Golden Boy Promotions and DAZN for jilting him on his pay, as he describes, and decides to take his services to another platform and fight under another banner, even if it's just for a one-off.
The stars would really have to align for that to happen.
Even in this purse bid situation where other promotional outfits would be allowed to bid on the fight and the winning bid gets to host the event, even in that situation, these are not normal circumstances. Canelo Alvarez is entangled in a legal battle, and I don't know what effect that's going to have on his career moving forward. What is he and what is he not allowed to do under these circumstances? He is still under contract.
Does Golden Boy Promotions or DAZN have right of first refusal?
In all likelihood, they do. Hypothetically speaking, if the winning bid is, say, I don't know, $22 million from, Tom Brown, Al Haymon, the people over there at the PBC. Perhaps DAZN, Golden Boy Promotions, might decide to match it just to ensure that whatever Canelo Alvarez is doing, he's doing on their side of the street. Could be a situation like that. I really don't think that any of these other outfits that are out there are going to stake $35 million of their own dollars during this pandemic just to land Canelo versus Yildirim. If they put together a bid, it might be a sizable bid compared to somebody else, but for Canelo, I don't know, maybe they put together $15 million or $20 million. That $20 million is less than Canelo's contracted amount that he's supposed to make, under ideal circumstances, per fight. 33, 35 million, something like that.
On DAZN.
In that situation, I don't know. Since Canelo Alvarez would essentially be taking a pay cut, perhaps DAZN would decide to flip the bill. But that's assuming this even gets off the ground. That's assuming that this even gets that far. I'm not sure that Canelo Alvarez is all that interested in getting out there against the likes of Avni Yildirim. Not under these circumstances, not when he's in the beginning stages of litigation. You can sit here hypothesizing scenarios where the fight comes off, but not a single one of those scenarios seems all that likely to me.